Okay, so I'm going to start my session. My name is Yuri. Don't try to pronounce my surname. It's even without the diacritics a little bit weird. On the first slide, you can see my blog, where you can mainly find what's going on around the .NET provider if I am implementing some new feature or it's implemented or in code. So I'm posting like the use cases or how to use it before it's released. And there's also my email. If you will have any questions later, feel free to drop me a line. And I will start with some recap of what the .NET provider for Firebird is. So first of all, it's a native implementation of the Firebird wire protocol. That means you don't need the client library, and wherever you compile your C# code, you can use it. So you are not limited to Windows, Linux, and all these classical platforms. In fact, you can run it on the iPhone using the Mono, or on Android using the Monodroid. If you look at my blog, you will see I tried it. It's completely written in C#. So if you want to check something in a code, it's a C#. And we have a support for Firebird embedded. Through the p-invoke, of course, the Firebird is not implemented in the C# itself. The versions that are available right now are for Microsoft.NET and for the Mono. The versions of framework we are now supporting is 2.0, and all the versions in between to 4.0. Right now I'm thinking about dropping the support for 2.0 and keeping only 3.5 and higher. But I will send into the mailing list some notice to get some feedback. And of course we have some additional pieces to all the .NET stuff around, like the DDX for Visual Studio, web providers if you are using the Firebird for storing the users and the permissions, all this stuff on an ASP.NET web application. Here are some numbers about the assembly itself. In a release mode, in debug mode, of course, there's a little bit more. It's slightly over 11,000 lines of code. The maintainability index is 81, which is good. Everything above 80 is good. It's from 0 to 100, and the higher the better. So the code is not, at least based on this index, not a mess, but it definitely could use some love in a couple of pieces. A couple of other numbers I was able to get from the Visual Studio. You can run it in your Visual Studio as well to check it. In last year we had two releases. The first one was 2.6.0. In fact, it was, I'm not sure, right before the conference last year or right after, something like that. The link points to a page where you can find all these changes. And then, like half a year ago, 2.6.5. The 2.6 added the .NET framework for client support. The client profile is a subset of the whole .NET framework, because you don't need the stuff for ASP.NET and all this stuff on the client side if you are using only the portion of framework on workstations, not on the servers. Also added Entity Framework for support. There were some changes in the code generation, SQL handling, and so on. Added cancellation of commands support, and the UTF-8 for file names, which was added to the Firebird wire protocol. The 2.6.5 added the support for TraceAPI. In fact, the last conference, a lot of people talked about the TraceAPI, and I was so influenced with the people all around the conference places that I said, like, yeah, I should look at it deeply and maybe I can implement it in a no time. And yes, it took me a couple of weeks or something like that. I'm doing it on my free time, so it was not a long time. A couple of improvements in SQL commands generation for entity framework. Added support for logging of commands, which is kind of now under the review because it collides with some logging other people are using, so it's probably going to a little bit change. Some small speed improvements if you are executing big queries or store procedures with a lot of parameters, and of course a lot of small improvements in the code itself to make it more stable and faster, of course. So the command cancellation, the first huge part. Since Firebird 2.5, there is an option to cancel the running command directly through the API. You don't have to delete it from monitoring tables. And together with it, I added the support to run the command in background, because if you start running the command, it's stuck waiting for the result, and there will be no way to cancel it. So now you can run it in background and continue doing something else or cancel it after some time. The cancellation itself, based on the definition of the protocol, can be disabled. You can do that in .NET driver as well. If you have some critical part of your application and you are not sure with all the path of your code, you can simply disable it, run updates of your database or something like that, and then enable it, so the user or any other admin or something like that will not be able to cancel the commands, and your data will be more or less safe. Maybe I will go through the slides immediately and then switch to the code, so I will not be jumping back and forth. The TraceAPI, that's the other huge part. The Firebird server itself provides the tracing. Every transaction, new connection, commit, rollback, prepare command, execute store procedure, and so on, could be traced either directly on the server, saved to some file or something like that, that's the auditing, or traced from the application, so you can see what's going on there on real time or almost real time. There's some delay on the network, of course. And you can, again, save it to file, see what's going on, and process it. The .NET driver has a full support for the configuration, so every option you can specify in the config file on the server, you can specify in the code, and you can even export it to the string. So if you are not sure about the exact syntax of the configuration, you can create it in the .NET and then export it to string. The only problem with it is that it's a string of string lines, so it's a little bit harder to parse because you are getting only the strings. You can ask Thomas Steinmeier. He did the FB trace manager or something like it's called, and it's not an XML format or some binary format. It's just a string, a lot of strings. So if you wanted to parse only the times or something like that, you will have a lot of regular expressions. And probably the hardest problem is parsing of the session ID, because if you start the tracing session, you will get the ID of that session, and if you wanted to cancel it, stop, resume, or something like that, you need that ID, but you have to parse it from the text. But I will show you some simple regular expression to get it out of the string. Maybe I will skip this one. Oh no, it's second to last. The NuGet, maybe you heard about it if you are in the .NET world. NuGet is a package source repository, kind of. It's simply a website where you can upload your library, your sample project, whatever it's related to the .NET world, and either from command line or from directly from Visual Studio using nice user interface. You can download this library to your project and directly use it, or you can do it from command line. So the nice thing about the NuGet is that it's handling dependencies, web config updates, all this stuff for you, so you don't have to download the library, unzip it or install it, find it somewhere in the disk, edit the reference. You will just use the one command. It will directly jump into the Visual Studio, and you can use it. And not only it's handling these dependencies and so on, it's also handling the versions. So if you have a application that's using .NET Framework 2, and you install this package from NuGet or download it, it's not installing, it's just downloading it, it will give you the proper version, proper reference. Same if you have a compact framework or something like that. Right now I'm publishing only the .NET Framework 4 version, because by default you can use it with Visual Studio 2010. The command line version of course works with any project. If I will see that people are actively using it, of course I will put into the whole package the versions for 3.5, 2.0, and even a mono. So some other stuff that were done before I jump into the code. The speed improvement I was talking about for the big queries is based on the prepare buffer. If you are executing the command, first it's sent to the server the prepare command, so the client knows about the parameters, the column names, and all this stuff. And the FB client by default has 32K buffer. .NET Provider had, I think, 8K, which means if the query was really huge, a lot of parameters, or a store procedure with a lot of parameters, it meant a couple of round trips back and forth to get all the parameters. Now, if it's 32K, as in FB client, it means it's probably faster because it will be only one round trip to get all this information. Again, also we are sending the op disconnect command, which helps server to recognize that the client is disconnecting and can release some internal resources, and there's no need to wait for some internal timeouts on the server to release these resources. If you are using Mono, you have maybe the knowledge about Mono dropping supported character sets, more or less on every release. And we had some conditional code for the Mono to remove the char sets that are supported by the Microsoft framework, but not on Mono. Because we are releasing approximately 2 times a year, and the Mono is releasing quite often, and even with some point releases, they removed some code. It was not working, so I did some rework that it's using all the character sets that's available on the Microsoft .NET framework, and if it's running on Mono, it's simply trying to first load this character set. If it fails, it processes the next one. The command tracing, I'm sorry talking about it. It's about to revisit a little bit, so it will not collide with other logging. And of course the bug fixes. The last one I did was with the garbage collector and disposing some internal structures where I was getting null reference exception, and thanks to the IB expert that sponsored for one client this bug fix, because it needed continuous amount of time to find the problem and fix it. I was able to fix it, and of course the entity framework SQL generation fixes. There were some problems with quoting characters and so on, and never-ending story of code cleanup. And if I mention the IB expert, maybe you know the project isn't maintained by me on full-time basis. I'm doing it in free time, And I should thank you first, the SMS timing, because they are providing me with some resources to spend my time on it, and lately also the IB expert, so I can deliver the features or the bug fixes, more importantly the bug fixes, if it needs some huge amount of time in one piece to quickly or even fix something that I will not be able to do else. So let's jump into the code. And what I'm going to show you first is the NuGet package, because it's really nice. You can run it either from the UI or from the command line. I will start with the command line. There's a simple PowerShell window that handles the NuGet commands. And if I type install package firebird sql.data.firebird client, it will connect to the NuGet package source repository, find whether this is a valid identifier. If so, it downloads it, installs, immediately add a reference to my project, updates the application config if it's needed. For Firebird client, it's not needed, and manages all these changes. So even now I had the clean console application, clean Visual Studio, nothing installed. In, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds, I was able to start using the Firebird without need to download it, know where the site is, unpack it, install, all this stuff was simply done for me. The user interface is a little bit more pleasant. You can see all these packages available on the NuGet. You can of course search the packages, and if you select something, you can click just install, and it will do the same process again. So I will reference to the namespace, and let's look at first to the command cancellation. Maybe I should start the server first. So we'll create the connection to the server. Of course, I have no idea how the connection string looks like. Oh, I'm just kidding. The localhost. I hope the database exists. This is DBA. So I will just try to open the connection. Yes, the database does not exist. Oh, without an extension. And I will create a new command. And I will create infinite loop, so it will be running more or less forever using the execute block. Can you see it? Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. That's better, right? So, begin and that looks I hope correct. If I run it, and I will bring the task manager. What begin? Oh, yeah, do begin. No, that wasn't it. Line 5.
The semicolon at the end should be one higher. That semicolon gone and there.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm lost in my own code.
No.
Line 5. Let's count the lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Select one from RDB database.
In 2. You probably need to.
Can I have an empty block? Oh yes, now it's burning my CPU. That's simply a bad query. Doesn't need to be this dummy one. You simply have a huge reporting query, and you start it, and the user finally decides like, no, I don't want to wait for this one to finish, and clicks cancel. Until 2.5 Firebird server, you had no way to cancel the command kind of gracefully. Now you can, and first of all, you can begin executing some query, which means I will start it, and it will be run on the background thread, and I will continue doing some other work before the data is available. And I can also cancel it. I need to provide callback that will be called when the data is ready. So I'm not processing the data at all because it's just a dummy loop. And I will sleep for, let's say, 2 seconds. And then I will call cancel, which is the new method on the FB command. And it should stop more or less immediately on the server. So it's burning the CPU. It stopped approximately after 2 seconds. If you will be reading some data, prepared reading some data, you will get an exception that the command was cancelled. It's a standard FB exception, so you can handle it and decide what to do. And as I said, in some critical conditions, you can disable the command cancellation. It's on a connection. It's valid for the complete connection. So if I put here disable cancel, by default, by the way, it's enabled. So if I put here disable, run the query again, then the cancel will be simply ignored. It's still burning my CPU. The cancel will not do anything, and it will be burning my CPU again. One thing to mention is that even if you are running the query on background, you should not run. It's still running. Never mind. And still running. Well, let's give it. even if you are running the command on the background, you should not issue any other commands or something like that, because that will be complete mess on the provider side. I was first thinking about creating some internal locking, so if you will be doing that, I will throw some exception, but it turned out it's not that easy to do it. So it's completely your responsibility to know, okay, I'm running on this FP command object query on background, so I should not use it for any other command, any other execution. So that's one warning. And let's look at the TraceAPI. The TraceAPI is exposed to you on the server through Services API, same as the remote backup or something like that. So you will find it in firebird.sql.data.services, and the class we are interested in, it's called fptrace. You need to assign some connection string, of course, to know where to connect. Again, I will use the same database. Then I need to specify some handler for my output, because it's how to get some result. There's no other way to read it. And I will simply write it to console. Oops. And then I need to provide the configuration for the trace. If you look at the Firebird server installation directory, there is fptraceconf file. It's a kind of sample file where you can find all the possible options you can use. So you can enable or disable, of course, the logging or the tracing. You can specify log file name if you are using audits, and the maximum log size, because you probably don't want to fill your disk with the auditing. Some filters for include or exclude the SQL, and what you want to trace: connections, transactions, prepare statement, free statement, and so on, procedures, triggers, and you can put there some statistics like the query plan and some IO stuff and so on. You can all configure it in this semi-XML format. Exactly the same structure is available for you in more strongly typed manner. So I can first say whether it's enabled or not. So of course it is. And I can say what events I'm interested in. That's not correct, sorry. Why it's taking wrong configuration? Oh. That's the proper one. So enabled equals true. Events, let's say we are interested in connections and in transactions, for instance, and filter it by database name, the one we are connected, and that's probably it. We don't need to specify anything else. I did it wrong. So now if I start the tracing session, yeah, of course I have to provide some session name. Let's say session, or you can put it null inside, doesn't matter. If I start it, it's a trace session ID1 started. Again, it's a string, so you have to parse the ID manually, and if I connect to the database, then it's not working. Why? Maybe I have some filters. Connections, enabled, database name. Maybe it needs to be in uppercase because it's uppercase on the disk. That's weird. Okay, let's remove this one to be sure it's working.
Maybe you need to use a full path.
Wait a minute. Oh yeah, I'm monitoring only the connections and the transactions. So that was the reason why I was not able to see the query. So you will get a text output where you can find a lot of information, like the transaction number, the isolation level, what happened, like the commit transaction, and if I start the new command, it will start a transaction. It's here, and so on. Again, if I commit it, you will see the output. So you can use it in your application on the client side, for instance. If you have some problems with application on the client side, you can turn it on, save this file for a couple of minutes and see what's going on, whether the queries are correct. Maybe you will see that the plan is not correct, the indices are broken or something like that. So the only problem is that if you will be using it, you can't easily stop it, because the stop method needs an integer to know what session you want to stop. As an sysdba, you can stop any session. As the normal user, you can stop only your own sessions. So you need to parse it directly from the code. There's no property for it, and I created a small application just to try something else. I will load it up. So make it bigger again. So to get the session ID, I'm using a simple regular expression to get it out of it. I don't know why it's not in some property available back to you. but this one should work, at least as far as the message is always the same. So I pass the session ID, then I can easily start it, stop it, whatever I need. And this project I created just to show how it works. It's a web application that you can start, provide some credentials to connect to database, and for 30 seconds the timeout is here because I initially put it public, and I was not sure to be able to anybody run tracing for a couple of hours on my server. So I put a 30 seconds timeout, but of course in a normal scenario you can use it as long as something is coming. So after 30 seconds it's going to stop the session with this value. It's using another FB trace instance to get it, because the first one is locked, processing the requests as started. Where's my start? Here's my start. So I'm starting the session. If something really bad happens, I will write to the output the exception, and that's all it's able to do. And why I'm showing it? Because you can run ASP.NET application on a lot of servers, even if you are, for instance, traveling and you wanted to quickly monitor your application, what's going on. If you have some performance problems, you can use such a simple web page for you to see what's going on. If I submit the query, it connects to the server. Oh, yeah, thank you. I hope I will be able to make it in 30 seconds. It's still loading. You can see the, no, not, it's still spinning. And in pure text output, I can see what happened. I will refresh it again. So yeah, the trace session started. And I see a couple of queries running, prepare statement, then it was executed. It took 7 milliseconds. I see the query, I see the transaction that was executing the query, and so on. So there was a simple service you can put maybe publicly on the internet and use it for fun or for real work if you are really in a hurry to see what's going on. And you don't have to, for instance, open the port on the Firebird server to get this information. Just put this application into your internal network and access only this web environment where you have it more under control. You can have like password and so on in your monitoring toolbox on the web, and use it if needed. So I think I used cancellation, TraceAPI, NuGet. That's it. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. If not, I think in a couple of minutes my time will be over. Don't be afraid to put a feedback into the .NET Provider mailing list. If you have something like, this could be improved, this is my scenario I'm using. I always like to hear what are the scenarios, how are you using the .NET driver? Because if I'm designing a new feature, for instance, like the TraceAPI, I can take this into the consideration. Yes?
If I understood your example correctly, the user currently has to parse out the session ID.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be part of your API?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I decided no, for a couple of reasons. First, I think it should be part of my API if it's a part of API of Firebird. The other one is that the only reasonable solution is parsing it with the regular expression. And I can provide you the confirmation that this string will not change in some future versions of the Firebird. It's simply what I created, and it's nothing I do in cooperation with the core team. In fact, they know that the string output is not the best way. That, for instance, the XML format will be better to parse it. So, yeah, I know it's a pain because you have to create some kind of regular expression yourself, but I don't think it should be part of the provider because it's not stable.
There's really no other way to cancel a tracing session?
Cancel it?
Yes, to stop it. There's no other way.
If it's running, you have to open another connection and stop it. There is no way. Of course, you can close your application or kill it, but to stop it gracefully using the stop command, you have to open another connection.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Is all information you showed us about tracing, is this available in a monitoring tables in Firebird as well?
No, as far as I know.
Or is something added to these monitoring tables?
It's
Is it
extra.
added information or just same information as is stored in these monitoring tables?
It's more or less the same information you can find in monitoring tables. The only difference is that you are using kind of different pipe to get to this information.
Yeah.
The TraceAPI is pushing to the data.
Something like listener to...
Yeah, exactly. And in monitoring table, you have tables you have to actively query it like every second, every minute, whatever you are interested in.
Yeah.
But the information is more or less the same. Okay, I asked on Twitter if somebody has some question, they can post it. But nobody is interested. So if you have no other questions, I will thank you for your attention. On the first slide, it will be definitely available for you to download all the slides. You will have my email, so if you find something you need to ask, feel free to send me an email, or maybe better, send it to the mailing list, so if I will respond to you, all other people will see the reply. Thank you.